And once again, just to let everybody know that you've tuned in to Veracity In Defiance, the debate between the Libertarian Party and Green Party candidates for Illinois State Comptroller and for Senate. Will begin in just a few minutes here. But there will also be an opportunity for you folks at home to tweet your questions to Veracity Defy hashtag 3PV, and we'll answer as many of those questions, or we'll have the candidates answer as many of those questions as possible in the final segment. In the meantime, we're just a couple minutes away. You ready, Kit?
I'm ready to rock and roll for Chicago.
How you feeling, pal?
I'm feeling confident.
Good, good. We've got some folks in here, and we're starting to fill this up, and we'll have a nice discussion. So
can't wait for it.
Yeah. Thanks again for everybody for tuning in.
Absolutely. And also thank you for all the people who've been sharing our content on YouTube. We have our Veracity In Defiance YouTube page. You can see some of our earlier work. We even covered the DNC convention, the lead poisoning in East Chicago, as well as numerous other social events happening here in the city of Chicago.
Yeah.
So check us out and support all independent media.
I actually reposted the discussion that you got with Thomas Frank. You did 2 interviews with Thomas.
We did 4 interviews with Thomas Frank. 2 of them are still being edited right now. There's actually
I guess I got some
part.
homework.
There is a second part to the Toxic Tour that he took us on. You could check out our YouTube video, The Toxic Tour. It's from first-hand experience.
It's powerful.
In Indiana, when you go near the smelting factories and the other toxic facilities that are there, there's a huge change in the environment. The air is toxic. The water looks disgusting. There's a sense of death in the air, and I've never seen anything like it before. And
hey, Koch brothers.
Well, yeah. Hey, Koch. How you doing? Thanks for polluting the air and water.
That's it. And we're also going to be rebroadcasting this next week on CAN TV, and we'll let people know dates and times. You can check that out at Veracity In Defiance, or at WC Turk's Helter Skelter blog on WordPress at wordpress.com, and I'll make sure that I keep all those all that updated. But it'll be run in its entirety. So stay tuned. So
please follow through, man.
Yeah.
Comment on our Twitter page, hashtag 3PV.
I'm just going to introduce this gentleman before we start here. Kit Cabello, and behind the camera, Maurice Randall and Dan Lupker. Ran into Dan in particular by accident when I was doing my radio show over at Q4 Radio, and one of my hosts ran into 3 people. Katie Madison was another one. 3 young people who were coming home from Iowa, stumping for Bernie Sanders. And the person who brought them back from Iowa literally dumped them on the side of the road. And my host ran into them and said, "Hey, I ran into these three people. They're unbelievable. They've got a lot to say. Would you like to have them on your radio show?" And I didn't hesitate. They brought in Kit. Maurice came, and then in short order became a regular on the radio program, and from that, you guys have taken off and started Veracity In Defiance, which is really talk a little bit about Veracity In Defiance and tell people what it's about.
Well, Veracity In Defiance is the first online progressive news show here in the city of Chicago, and most importantly, it's independent media. That means we don't take money from corporations. We're not going to spill out their lies, and we really care about covering stories that you're not going to see on mainstream media. For me, I'm a former Marine, and I'm a college graduate, and the one thing I believe in is facts, information, and being honest. And what we're seeing from our news media right now at this current moment is dishonesty, covering up for the establishment, and the American people, no matter who they are or what party they're affiliated with, they're being ignored. Collectively, as a whole nation, we are being ignored. So it is our social responsibility here as journalists for Veracity In Defiance to be part of the spear that bring truth back to the American people. Mm-hmm. And, of course, are we going to cover stories that are going to make people angry? Are we going to cover stories that are going to make people cry? But
If you do it right.
If you do it right, you're going to still inform them. And it's up to all of us here, all of you watching at home. It's our social responsibility to be informed. It's our social responsibility to take care of each other and to make a better future. And that's what Veracity In Defiance is going to stand for. And I'm proud to say that Daniel and Maurice and our good friend Diesel, they're the best friends I could ever work with, and they're the team. They're the team. Oh, and Maurice, a.k.a. the Ultimate Rage. Also, a shout out to LB and also to Myra as well. Sorry, I forgot them as well. But other than that, thank you all for tuning in, and let's get this thing started.
Let's get this thing started. All right, welcome to the 2016 Veracity In Defiance Debates for Illinois Senate and Illinois Comptroller, moderated by Kit Cabello and myself, W.C. Turk. Kit, go ahead and start off, buddy.
All right. So our democracy, it relies on diversity of ideas and actual choice rather than the illusion of choice. A vibrant multi-party system supported and held accountable by an engaged, empowered, and informed electorate endangers an efficient responsibility and an enduring democracy. This debate will be in three parts. We will hear from candidates from the Office of Illinois State Comptroller in just a moment, followed by candidates for U.S. Senate, and then a question and answer segment from our audience. None of the candidates have been given the questions ahead of the debate.
Good.
All right. Also, due to the time restraints, candidates should strive to keep responses and rebuttals to 1 minute. For critical issues, the moderators may extend and encourage a longer debate from both candidates. Each candidate will be afforded a 2-minute closing statement. The emphasis here will be on substance and accuracy so that voters may make the most informed choice from all the candidates on the ballot.
Hey, for our online audience, by the way, you can tweet your questions to Veracity Defy. That's VERACITY-DEFY. It's all one word. Veracity Defy. Hashtag 3PV. We will have an opportunity at the end of this program that you at home can engage the candidates with your questions as well. This is about substance, and we aim to keep it about substance. If everyone is prepared to begin, let's welcome our first candidates running for the Illinois Comptroller position. Unfortunately, the Libertarian Party candidate, Claire Ball, could not be here tonight. We were very sad that she canceled at the last minute. We feel, well, we're going to storm ahead here and have a greater conversation then with the candidate from the Green Party, Tim Curtin. Tim, if you want to come on over.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you. Welcome. Oh, please sit here.
Thank you very much. And again, the candidate for Illinois Comptroller from the Green Party, Tim Curtin. Okay. Thank you for coming. Thank you. Appreciate you making the time for us tonight and making the time for our at-home audience. That said, I'd like to invite you to give a 2-minute opening statement. All right. And then we'll begin with the questions.
All right. Well, I think it's a fantastic thing that what Veracity is doing. Lord knows our state desperately needs democracy to break out. The way I got on the ballot, the way the Green Party got on the ballot in this state is we had to petition. As a minority party candidate, we had to get over 25,000 signatures in less than 90 days. The way that happened was we took the petition out and people grabbed it. People are desperate. I asked people a simple question. Are you satisfied with the way Springfield is operating? Didn't matter whether they were Democrat, Republican, or independent. People grabbed it. So we have no democracy in our state. The way I look at it and the way the Green Party looks at it, we have two parties and nothing's happening on behalf of the working people in this state. The Democrats blame Bruce Rauner. Plenty of that's going on. The Republicans blame Mike Madigan. It's also true, but nobody is doing anything for working people in our state. That's why I'm running for comptroller. We need to break the log jam. We need to have democracy break out. I There's a budget deficit. Nobody's doing anything about it. I I have a plan to raise $13 billion. It's called the Financial Transactions Tax, House Bill 106. It's been jammed in committee by Mike Madigan for years. The reason I'm running is, frankly, I've been a political activist all my life. I was a union organizer for 37 years. And the way you look at it in the labor business, the less you're organized, you're exploited. So that's what's happening to the people of Illinois, and I intend to put a stop to it.
All right, and let's lead to our first question so that you can answer it, Mr. Sir.
Shoot.
All right, as it currently stands, Illinois as a whole is sitting on more than $9 billion backlog of unpaid bills. And as a consequence of this, it leaves many services and vendors left unpaid. This leaves many tax-paying citizens of Illinois wondering if social services will continue to be provided, and leaving many to doubt that Illinois can have a prosperous future. What is your policy to get Illinois to pay its backlog of unpaid bills?
Okay. Well, first of all, there's a reason for the backlog. In 2015, state taxes were cut. We take in $4.8 billion a year less. It's interesting. The Republicans always complain about taxes going up. Taxes went down for corporations as well. So we're taking in less money, but we don't tax the right people. We have a flat tax. So people don't pay on a proper basis. One day, although it would take a constitutional amendment, we need a progressive income tax. That would help. But short term, we could still do the financial transactions tax and raise $13 billion. My priorities are this. In fact, I was in a town meeting in Chatham, on the south side of Chicago. Same question. If I got in there, top priority would go to education, social services, and since the legislature does nothing, I wouldn't pay them a dime because they don't do their jobs.
All right, we're gonna stay on the financial transaction tax. I like that. I thought it was very, very important. And also, I also wanted to extend this invitation just to make sure that because Claire Ball couldn't be here today, we did extend an invitation to the Libertarian Party. There is a representative from the Libertarian Party here. So if for any reason we mischaracterize something from the Libertarian Party position and you want to correct us on it, please do so. It's very important for us that we maintain as much accuracy as we can. That said, National Nurses United estimates that a small tax of 50 cents on every $100 of Wall Street trades and other transactions, a financial transaction tax, or FTT, a tax of 0.5% would generate up to $350 billion nationally each year. The U.S. had an FTT until 1966. After the 1987 crash, Bob Dole and President George Bush, both Republicans, advocated in favor of reinstating the FTT. The London Stock Exchange, with a 0.5% tax on each stock trade, has successfully raised revenues while not inhibiting financial activity. The 2012 trading volume for the Chicago Mercantile Group, the CME here in Chicago alone, was $806 trillion. At current trading levels, up to $80 billion would be realized annually by a modest tax of just 0.01% on the CME. Since we are continually levying more and more of the tax burden on property owners, soda drinkers, pet owners, cigarette smokers, wine drinkers, parking spaces, and an endless litany of other taxes, you obviously support the FTT. Make that case as strongly as you can.
Okay. In this state, it's House Bill 106. It was introduced by State Representative Mary Flowers of Chicago. The way the tax would work is this. It would be on the Board of Trade Options and the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, just the traders. The institutions themselves, they already pay taxes. Average trade is $200,000. This would be $1 to $2 a trade. but you could raise $13 billion a year. What could you do with the money? You could wipe out the deficit. Right now, state of Illinois is one status above junk bond. And what do we keep doing? We continue to borrow money. So we could improve the status of financing the state. We could start funding public education again. We're actually 50 out of 50 states. I've got 2 sons in community college. They've cut $550 million for community college. They got rid of the MAP grants for low-income students. All of those things need to be done again. We have 55,000 low-income women who work who had their child care taken away. Lutheran Social Services, 700,000 people that were serviced by them are no longer serviced anymore. So if we have that tax, we can do all of those things. And while the comptroller isn't in the state legislature, if I'm elected, I will use the bully pulpit. I will go out and we will raise holy hell because the people of Illinois are desperate for change. That's why they signed the petition. That's why they're supporting this candidacy, because people are desperate for change. They're entitled to it. I tell people, if you just want a bookkeeper, don't vote for me, because I'm not going to be a bookkeeper. I'm going to be a people's advocate.
What would you say to those people who say that the pinprick taxes are one thing, but now you're taxing the success of Wall Street or the CME, and that really the key to this is lowering taxes in order to, especially on the wealthy and especially on corporations, in order to generate more jobs and more prosperity in the state?
Well, like I said already, taxes on corporations were lowered significantly in Illinois in 2015. Trickle-downs never worked. The rich continue to keep their money. Maybe if they raise taxes on luxury boats, maybe that would help. But trickle-down didn't work under Ronald Reagan, and it isn't going to work in Illinois. We need a progressive tax and short-term. It's not the CME that would pay the tax. They pay taxes. It's the electronic traders.
Right.
They could afford $1 or $2 on a $200,000 trade. They'll still make millions.
Some of whom virtually just get a key and walk away.
Exactly. It's not as if they're shoveling coal.
Right.
Exactly. So, as an independent candidate, you will be holding a seat that will determine how Illinois will pay its bills and get revenue back into our state.
True.
Now, the evidence is clear that both Democrat and Republican establishment parties have invested a significant amount of money to see which official will hold the office of Illinois comptroller. And it can be argued that this is a war between Governor Bruce Rauner and Speaker of the House Michael Madigan. Should either one of you be elected as or should you be elected as comptroller, what actions are you prepared to make to have both political parties sit down, establish a budget so that Illinois can pay its bills, and keep your office independent from 2 establishment parties that do not agree on how to establish our state's budget?
Well, first of all, let me comment on the money that's going into this. I was at a debate last night with, and Susanna Mendoza, the Democrat, was there. Leslie Munger, the Republicans, raised $10 million. Susanna Mendoza, who was attacking her, has raised $2 million. In this state, unfortunately, it's pay for play, and everybody tries to buy influence. As Green Party candidates, we won't take corporate money. We won't take PAC money. So if you vote us into office, we're actually going to be the voice of the people. The only way we can be elected is if the people decide. That's why forums like the one I was at last night and this kind of forum actually give candidates or people an opportunity to listen to candidates, hear them answer questions, and decide for themselves. I believe that if I'm elected and I use the bully pulpit. We will organize massive rallies. I've been an organizer all my life. I know how to do that. And we will bring people to Springfield, and we will hold the other two political parties and their leaders, we will hold their feet to the fire. And heaven help them if they don't do the right thing by the people of Illinois.
Be in the street and in the ballot box. The state of Illinois currently runs a debt of just over $163 billion, with revenues of $128 billion and spending of $139 billion. In 2014, the late Judy Bartz-Pinka warned that Illinois taxpayers were spending billions just to manage the state's debts. The research unit of the Illinois legislature in 2014 estimated that the state missed $1.2 billion in revenue from corporate tax breaks. I believe that's actually a low number, including $121 million by retailers for their own record keeping. Crane's Chicago Business also in 2014 reported that 2/3 of Illinois' businesses paid no state income tax, even though they had taxable income. Governor Rauner approved $100 million in tax breaks while cutting social services amid the current budget impasse. Speaker Madigan and former Governor Quinn are also equally culpable. It seems business gets all the perks while the individual taxpayer gets the bill. You've kind of touched on this a little bit, but I'd love it if you'd expand on this topic a little bit more on what you would do to level the playing field and bring true reform to the system and the taxpayers here in Illinois.
Well, part of the reason, and you're right, the debate, the largest part of the debt is pensions. Okay, both parties for years would have what they call a pension holiday, no money in. In fact, one year, I think it was 95, they changed the rules so you don't have to put as much in. So it's all gimmicks, and it's interesting. Not paying state workers their pension was on a bipartisan basis. So every once in a while they act in their own special interest and nothing for the taxpayers. If we raise the $13 billion a year that I'm talking about, slowly we can begin to pay that down. Part of it, part of the deficit is payment on the debt. So it's like a snowball. Heaven knows what it was when it began. There was an article in the Springfield, I should have brought it, but the Springfield newspaper actually had a chart on how it's grown over years. So you put in some money, you start paying down the debt, that improves the credit rating of the state, the cost of money goes down. But that's not my top priority. Now, everybody is entitled. People don't understand a lot of state employees don't get Social Security, okay? And what the Republicans always do is they run ads that talk about how rich state employees are. But if you don't get Social Security and they steal your pension, you have very little to live on. So you start paying that down. And the other thing you do is you restore public education. We have professors that are leaving our state. It's criminal. If we don't invest in public education, there is no future in our state. So that's my top priority. It's interesting because the state constitution, it's not a mandate, but it actually says that the state should contribute at least 50% towards the cost of public education. Right now we're at about 20%. What happens is that if you want good schools like in Oak Park right now, I was driving through Oak Park on the way here, tax levy, $25 million. It's going to be seniors who can't afford it, who will lose their homes if it passes, versus people who want good education. That's a false setup. There ought to be enough money. If the state was doing their job and funding it even at 30%, there'd be plenty of money. Seniors could keep their homes, and there'd be enough education money to improve schools.
Let me ask you this, because you brought up a couple times $13 billion that you would raise. Is that all from the financial transactions tax? And the follow-up to that would be, is if there wasn't a financial transaction tax, and you would have to know that in the legislature under the current system, the pushback against any taxes on the wealthy would be an uphill battle. If there wasn't a financial transaction tax, where does that leave you as far as priorities for paying bills or helping the elderly taxpayer?
Well, there are certain court mandates that have to be paid. And that takes a lot of the current budget. Beyond that, there are certain discretionary funds. And again, I would start with public education. It's interesting that of the, I believe it's 78% of the budget that's mandated, it isn't even explained where the money goes. Rauner and his friends actually gave out $7.5 million in bonuses to people from the Department of Transportation, non-union employees. So I would start with, you have to pay the people that work for the state. Beyond that, it's public education and social services, and not a dime for anybody that's employed by the legislature. But let me say again, if people elect me, it'll be because they want a political revolution in Springfield. There's no way, if I get elected comptroller, and I think I could, that the status quo will have any credibility. Okay?
Do you believe that revolution is possible with the two-party system the way it's dominated now, the way the system's dominated now?
Well, it's a long shot, but people are very angry. It's the only way I got on the ballot. People are frustrated. I was in Chatham last night, south side of Chicago. It was a great town hall event. People listened. At the end of the meeting, people were coming up and thanking me. And even though Susanna Mendoza had $2 million, they were taking my stuff. It's what is lacking in this state is viability for third-party candidates. On an equal playing field, we would win.
Well, then let me interject then, because you mentioned third-party candidates. Throughout this campaign, both Susan Mendoza, the Democratic comptroller, and the incumbent Republican Leslie Munger have both accused each other of being the pawn of their party's figures, Governor Bruce Rauner and Speaker of the House Michael Madigan, respectively. This can most notably be seen from their WTTW debate, a public network that denied both you and Claire from the Libertarian Party to be on the debate stage. Actions such as these can be seen on a nationwide scale with Republicans and Democrats name-calling, using divisive political ads, and when either one of them is put into office, nothing is accomplished. Americans as a whole, we're getting tired of this, and we want our government to work. In your own opinion, has this current election cycle made Americans lose trust in the two establishment parties and reevaluate third parties as a political force?
I think it has. Let me give you an example. Both Claire and I, let me say I have a lot of respect for Claire as well. She's a good person. We both sat through debates at the Chicago Tribune and the Chicago Sun-Times, and it was exactly what you were talking about. Leslie Munger would bring in statistics to show that Mike Madigan was controlling Susanna Mendoza. Susanna Mendoza would bring in her version of the statistics to show that it was all Mike Madigan's fault. But people are angry about gridlock. I think it's interesting to me that voters are called apathetic. They are not apathetic. It's learned behavior. Last time I picked Tweedle Democrat, it didn't work out. The time before that, I picked Tweedle Republican, and it didn't work out. So this time, I think a lot of people are going to vote green because I think people are beginning to understand that the two parties are, they're on the same coin. They represent different interests of rich people, and if you flip a coin and both sides are losers, you need to start heading in the new direction.
So as a follow-up, you definitely believe that there's going to be a larger surge for possibly 3, 4, or 5 political parties in the near future for the United States?
Yeah, I do. I think what's happened this year is a huge development. We're going to get a lot of votes. We're going to get an incredible amount of votes. I don't know if it's going to be enough to win. I'm not crazy. I don't have resources. But I think what we can do is we can help democracy break out in our state. That's what we really need to happen.
Last quick follow-up that I have for you. You mentioned earlier about the bully pulpit and having a bully pulpit. Do you feel that being a not one of the two dominating parties, that by the way is a difficult characterization, because you don't want to say alternate parties, you don't want to say, but not one of the two dominating political parties. Do you feel that gives you a stronger voice if you were to be elected as comptroller for the state of Illinois?
Well, it gives me an independent voice, because again, if people vote for me, if people elect me, then they did it based on, it's like against all odds. They got past all the commercials. They chose me based on what I had to say and fighting for change. So that would give me the opportunity to use the bully pulpit. I've told people before, if I'm elected, we're going to have meetings all over the state. I'm going to bring the budget. It's not going to just be online. We're going to have 2 meetings a year downstate. We're going to have 2 meetings around Cook County. We're going to bring all the books. People can see for themselves. They'll be able to ask questions. And I dare the politicians to vote against people's best interest. So that's what I'll do.
Beautiful.
Sounds good.
Did you want to call that your closing remarks, or did you have something more that you wanted to say?
Just a couple of things.
Please.
Okay. The way I look at this election, people have a real choice this time. They can continue to vote for politicians. They can continue to have a deficit, which will never end. The Democrats are going to continue to blame the Republicans. The Republicans are going to continue to blame the Democrats, and nothing will get done. The deficit will continue to grow. So if you'd rather have a political activist, if you'd rather have an organizer who knows how to fight for people's interest, you should vote green in 2016. If you want a bookkeeper, don't vote for me. If you want an activist, you should vote for me. And I will help raise the revenue that, and begin to fund public education, social services, and fight for real change. So I hope people will vote for Tim Curtin and vote green in 2016.
Very good. Tim Curtin is the candidate from the Green Party for Illinois State Comptroller. I'd like to
Thank you for
Tim
joining us.
for joining us. Pleasure. In just a minute or so, we're going to invite our friend from the Libertarian Party over to give a statement. We invited, and up until just a day or so ago, and in Claire Ball's case this afternoon, we invited candidates from the Libertarian Party, and in Claire Ball's case, she had a family emergency and unfortunately couldn't be here. That's why we asked a representative from the Libertarian Party to come and join us for a couple of reasons, to give a little bit on the position by the Libertarian Party, but also to make sure that we did not mischaracterize in any way any libertarian positions. So we wanted to be very, very fair and very clear on that. That said, in a moment we're going to be joined by our senatorial candidates. You are listening to a debate for Illinois comptroller and senator from Illinois from the Libertarian and Green parties, brought to you on YouTube by Veracity In Defiance. You can tweet your questions. We're going to be taking questions from some of our audience here. And we're also going to be taking questions from Twitter. And those questions you can send to Veracity Defy, hashtag 3PV. And I'll spell that for you, VERACITYDEFY, hashtag 3PV. And we'll answer as many of those questions in the final segment as we can. You can also please like Veracity In Defiance on Facebook. VID is an independent, not-for-profit news and nonpartisan investigative news organization dedicated to the free, unbiased, unfiltered dissemination of information and news in defiance of propagandizing corporately filtered news. So coming up, we're going to be joined by our Libertarian representative. As a matter of fact, if you'd like to join us right now.
Glad to have you here.
Welcome, buddy.
Welcome to Veracity In Defiance.
Thanks, man. So, as I was saying there in our little transition, we wanted to be very careful not to mischaracterize any of the positions. I do in some of the questions, particularly for Senate, I do juxtapose the Libertarian Party platform against the Green Party platform to make sure that I was inclusive as possible. But that's why you're here, to help us stay on track and be accurate. You had a brief statement that you wanted to give about the Libertarian Party. The microphone is all yours, my friend.
Please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Justin Tucker. I'm the chair of the Libertarian Party of Chicago. I want to thank Veracity In Defiance for letting me speak. The two-party system is definitely, hopefully it's going to break up, and we need more choices. And you said the dominant parties. That's totally true. That they dominate through excessive ballot access. So alternate views are being suppressed. So it's important that folks can get active, folks can, support candidates that they actually believe in, and hopefully we can break this duopoly. I'm a libertarian because I believe in self-ownership, and I believe in non-aggression. The biggest aggressor in the history of mankind has been the state. As libertarians, we feel that we feel that the state should be minimized while freedom's maximized. Libertarianism has been described as conservatism for people who still like to get high, low-tax liberalism, fiscally conservative, socially liberal. There's many ways to describe it, but I think the best way is don't steal, don't kill, leave everybody alone. And that is why I'm a libertarian. Some things we do support are legalization of marijuana. We've been supporting that ever since our party's been founded. Marriage equality is another thing that we have worked for many years. And these are things that we can work with Greens. There's tons of issues that we both agree on, and let's break this duopoly.
Agreed.
Well, thank you.
Thank
You're more than welcome. If you want to slide over a chair, we're going to bring Scott Summers in, our Senate candidate from the Green Party. And you can help keep us on track. It won't be a debate between the two of you, but again, we're here for accuracy. So if at any time we misrepresent something from the Libertarian Party, please feel free to correct us. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Scott Summers, senatorial candidate from the state of Illinois.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Do you want to give an opening statement.
I will. Thank you.
Please. Thank you.
Let me start by just introducing the Green Party to our audience. The Green Party has what we call 4 pillars. Our principal, well, 4 pillars as in a way to define ourselves. And those 4 pillars are social justice, grassroots democracy, ecological wisdom, and nonviolence. I'll repeat those. Social justice, grassroots democracy, ecological wisdom, and nonviolence. Now, I'd like to suggest that those are true American values. Those are world values. We are not talking about marginal things. We are talking about all of humanity when we speak together as Greens. Let me give you some resource information for the Green Party. You can find the information on the web for the National Party at gp.org. That's gp.org for the National Party. The Illinois Party is just like that. It's ilgp.org, ILGP for the Illinois Green Party website. And my campaign website, summersforsenate.us. I'll spell that out. It's all one word. My last name, Summers, S-U-M-M-E-R-S, F-O-R, Senate.us.
Fantastic. All right, let's get to it.
Thank you.
Good deal. Libertarian candidate Kenton McMillan believes, and again, we're sorry that Kenton couldn't be here today. Libertarian candidate Kenton McMillan believes that the country is moving in the wrong direction and blames endless wars, deficit spending, increased regulation, and a massive federal government. He believes in slashing the size of government with quote-unquote machete cuts to commerce, education, and transportation. Mr. Summers, you have advocated for a write-down in student and home mortgage loans, financial transaction tax, single-payer health care, educational opportunities via tax reform. Both represent very, very different perspectives affecting the nearly $20 trillion in national debt that we face, in no small part due to unfunded and unnecessary wars and excess in the financial sector. Why should voters vote for your fiscal vision over not just of the Libertarian Party, but of the other parties as well?
It's a common sense sort of approach to financing. I think we are overlooking all kinds of people in this election. The good, decent people of America who struggle every day to put food on the table and shoes on the kids. We have to stop the handouts to people who don't need them. We have to rein in our military. We do not need to be the policemen of the world. We should stop giving subsidies, again, to people who don't need them. I'm very worried about interest on the national debt. Right now, we have very low interest rates. We have an enormous amount that we owe. It's a sleeping giant. Once interest rates start going back up, an inordinate amount of our tax dollars are going to be going to servicing the national debt. It's imperative that that be pared down. I think we start with the Defense Department. The Defense Department is the only federal agency that cannot account for its money. Every other agency accounts to Congress every year. Congress has ordered the Pentagon to account for its money. They're not likely to do it a year from now. That's the deadline. But let us think this way. We can all be patriots, and we can wear eye shades at the same time. We want our defense, but we want 100 cents of value on the dollar.
Very good.
All right.
This is a matter that I personally am interested in. So Americans, no matter what part of the country they live in, are losing trust in our current government. Congress stands currently with an 11% approval rating, and what many voters see in Washington, D.C. is a closed clubhouse that caters only to Wall Street, bankers, and corporations. The environment we have in our political system is unchecked corruption, in which all our elected officials, no matter what level, can be bought. Money in politics is crippling our democracy. So as an independent candidate, not affiliated with the two establishment parties, what will you bring to the Senate to address this issue of money in politics, and what steps will you take to lay the groundwork to get money out of politics?
I think we're all aware of the Citizens United decision from the U.S. Supreme Court a few years back. On that basis, corporations are people, money is speech. We have a real dysfunctional set of vision here for the way we should be financing our campaigns. I would be advocating for a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United. I would like to see our campaigns financed by public money, largely, not exclusively. The special interests would no longer have a place at the table in terms of writing bills, literally writing legislation behind closed doors. And that is the practice right now. Interests come to Congress and they have right in their pockets suggested legislation, all written out, ready to go. We need, as people, to be at that table. It is we the people, the first three words of our Constitution, we the people. That is our birthright. That is our missing ingredient today. I think it's self-evident that Washington's not going to save us. Springfield's not going to save us. Only we the people will save us. That gets back to the idea of grassroots democracy that the Greens advocate. We have the best resource of all, and that is each other, our families, our friends, our neighbors. And we work in our communities to raise one another up, not grind one another down. We have to take it upon ourselves to get into the local offices, the school boards, the townships, the counties, the park districts. On that basis, it's almost like the Chicago Cubs, if you will, we can say that today, with a wonderful farm team, right? And they worked very hard to bring people up into the major leagues, and they've got a quality team because of it. We've got to work on the, and I don't mean this disparagingly, the minor leagues, and we've got to get into office, we have to start getting elected, and we have to start asserting ourselves as we the people. That is our birthright, that is our goal, that is our destiny.
Thank you. Wonderful answer. My name is Kit Cabello. If you're just tuning in right now, this is my co-moderator, W.C. Turk, and you are listening to the debate for Illinois Comptroller and Senate for Illinois candidates from the Libertarian and Green parties, brought to you by, on YouTube, Veracity In Defiance. Tweet your questions on our Twitter page, VeracityDefy, hashtag 3PV, and we will answer as many of them as we can at the end of the night.
There you go. Scott, a subject that's been virtually ignored throughout this entire election season at all levels, that's the issue of man-made climate change. You've indicated a need to address global warming and accelerate work on strengthening green infrastructure. Describe the roadmap forward in that effort, including how that may be accomplished through job training and replacement rather than the elimination of jobs in traditional energy sectors such as coal, oil, and nuclear.
I think it's becoming self-evident to us all now that climate change is real. It's happening now. And it can't really be a long-term answer anymore. Maybe it can be intermediate term. I would prefer it be a shorter term. But we, as a world, have to stop burning so much stuff, be it coal, be it oil, be it natural gas. We have to stop burning it, not only to preserve our planet, but to preserve us as the human race. Now, that sounds pretty shrill and strident, I know. But that is really what is going to be at stake. Jill Stein, our Green Party candidate for president, advocates what she calls a Green New Deal. I support her in this idea. We recall the work programs of the 1930s that put people back to work. For all that our economy is starting to stumble along and getting a little bit better for maybe the better off people, we have a very discouraging, hardcore level of unemployment. That has to be addressed. And what we can do along the lines of a Green New Deal is train people to become able to retrofit our buildings with the newest, latest climate technology and to be constructing solar, wind, geothermal facilities. Training people into taking those jobs, which are so vital to our well-being, and also raising us up in terms of our economic equality. So I would hope that we would have that going forward. I have what I call a somewhat dire prediction. And it affects us sitting here in Illinois. I'm thinking, if people think the immigration problem is a problem now, you ain't seen nothing yet, because there will be all kinds of climate refugees in the coming years. And I think they will, in large part, be coming to the Great Lakes Basin. That is to say, all the Great Lakes, U.S. and Canada. Now, why would that be? Well, we're concerned about rising oceans. Here in Illinois and around the Great Lakes, we're well above what is expected to be the ocean levels. There will become parts of the planet that will be uninhabitable due to climate change. People will be coming here by the millions. Fresh water, above sea level, stable governance between us and the Canadians, and it's going to be very hard to plan for it, but we must accept them. Not only accept them, but help those people. They are refugees, and the Great Lakes Basin is going to be a lifeboat for humanity, a lifeboat for humanity.
We may have already seen some of that with the Syrian refugees and the Middle Eastern refugees and the crisis that we're facing with that now. So.
Indeed.
Exactly. Now, for you, Mr. Scott Summers, as you know, student debt in the United States is tallying around $1.3 trillion. Excuse me. And unlike other forms of debt, it cannot be forgiven. However, in 2008, our government forgave the banks that caused the economic disaster that we're still recovering from, and we are still able to give billions to the military-industrial complex. What will be your plan to fight for student debt forgiveness?
Well, it gets back to the idea of some of the things from the 30s and the 40s. We recall just now the jobs programs in the 30s. The GIs who came back from World War II had what was called the GI Bill. They could all go to college. Maybe they probably had to pay fees and for books and stuff, but they could go to college. And on that basis, they raised themselves up into good jobs. It was a win for the economy. It will be a win for the economy again if we get the burden of debt off today's students and today's recent graduates. Part of it, again, runs to legislation that is written behind closed doors. The reason why the student debt cannot be forgiven is because the bankruptcy laws were changed. You can get your debts discharged in bankruptcy with few exceptions, but for whatever reason, student loan debt were exempted. You have to pay your student loan debt irrespective of a bankruptcy. That's folly. We are, again, grinding down good people with our financial policies about being a student. Education, as Tim Curtin said earlier, is our most important function, our most important resource. We have to do right by all of our young people, all of our middle-aged people, all our elderly people to help one another, once again, be fully educated, fully trained. I think that's enough for now. I had a couple other points.
And I just wanted to put that number in perspective. Again, as Kit said, the student loan debt here in the United States is about $1.3 billion. The TARP
1.3 trillion.
1.3 trillion.
Yes.
The TARP bailout was $700 billion.
Perhaps I can get back on that.
Please.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Jill Stein and I advocate for forgiving all student debt. Getting back to the bailout of 2008, we still have the same fundamental problems lurking. I don't see anything that is going to change what's happened before. When we had the TARP and all the bailouts of the big financial institutions and all the big banks, we got it precisely backwards. All right? We should have been bailing out the people in terms of student loans, in terms of home mortgage, in terms of all other sorts of debt. Now, think about this. For all that we bailed out the banks, we're still paying 18 and 20 and 24% on credit cards, okay? What's that all about? We bail them out. They have basically no interest. I mean, the interest rates are vanishing interest. And for their gratitude and the help of the taxpayers to be reborn as corporations, they're charging us 20%. There used to be usury laws in this nation. All the states had usury laws. It went by the boards in the late 70s with a U.S. Supreme Court decision. But what a usury law used to be was states setting caps on interest rates. That was due to a Supreme Court decision, again, kind of an obscure decision, but the court held that national banks, states cannot dictate interest rates to national banks, basically speaking. And on that basis, all the usury laws were thrown out. I would be strongly advocating for a federal usury law, and that is something that's in the capacity of Congress to deliver. What they call dicta, that is this kind of a side discussion in the Supreme Court decision. They were thinking at the time that this was kind of just a technical issue, saying, you know, that the states cannot dictate to national banks. They thought there would just be a statute change. But boy, it was Katie bar the door. I mean, all the interest rates started to take off. All the credit cards started to go way up. Bank credit cards migrated to places like South Dakota and Delaware. That was for a reason, because they allowed the highest interest rates. We as people, and it's we the people advocating for ourselves again, we need a federal usury law. And that's my top priority in terms of fiscal responsibility for, again, we the people.
Those rates you used to have to go see again in Morocco
Yep.
for a little bit. Last weekend in Chicago, 17 were killed and nearly 3 times that were wounded in gun violence. According to Chicago police and the Brady Center to Prevent Gun Violence, 2/3 of guns seized by police in Chicago were purchased legally, the so-called straw purchases, while 1 in 5 were linked to violent crime. 1 in 5 linked to violent crime and homicides came from just 4 gun stores, like Westworth Sports in Indiana. Since 1994, background checks have prevented 2.6 million dangerous people from obtaining guns, with violent crime trending downward well before the recent proliferation of guns, but gun violence now trending upwards, including attacks on armed law enforcement, seemingly in conjunction with record gun proliferation and ownership. Is it moral to make a case for lesser gun regulations or no gun regulations at all?
I would say no to both those parts of the question. We need very high standards for gun regulation. I know my libertarian friends will disagree with me on this point. Gun violence is a public health issue now, and it's an epidemic. We should look at it that way. We need to take steps to curb the disease, and that is gun control. But let's face it, all the guns that are out there today are going to stay in circulation for decades to come. The way at gun control, in my opinion, for the moment anyway, I think we do need to take a lot of guns out of circulation, would be ammunition control. Now think about that. Ammunition is the consumable part of the equation. We need to be very careful in selling ammunition. It used to be, and perhaps it still is, you can go to some big box stores and get boxes of ammunition over the counter. We need to have a whole lot of constraints on that. You'll remember the tobacco settlement a few years back, which stood for the proposition that the taxpayers, specifically through Medicaid and Medicare, should not have to be picking up the cost of sick smokers. I extend that to gun violence. We, the people, should not have to pick up the medical costs in the form of Medicare and Medicaid of people who are wounded by gunshots. There is a doctrine at law called strict liability. And what that means is if you have something that's inherently dangerous and something goes bad, it's still your fault. So if you kept a Bengal tiger in your backyard, I'll say a pit bull in your backyard, and the kid next door let it out and it bit somebody, then it's your fault. That's strict liability. I think that has to inure to gun owners. I think we need to have gun insurance like we have car insurance. And I think we need to do everything we can to curb the gun profligation in this country. One thing we can do is a constitutional amendment, and that is an amendment to the Second Amendment. I think we're all aware that the Second Amendment is worded rather ambiguously. It refers to militia. And here's an idea I'm going to put forward. It's not my idea. I'll tell you in a second whose idea it is. It's to amend the Second Amendment to make it perfectly clear that guns in the hands of militia only it goes unfettered, and removes the idea that any other encumbrance on guns can be protected by the Second Amendment. Now, that sounds kind of wild and crazy, doesn't it? It's not my idea. It's the idea of retired Supreme Court Justice John Paul Stevens, one of the best legal minds in the country. Thank you.
All right, well said.
Please.
I can't resist.
Actually, I think it's natural that we get a second amendment perspective from the Libertarian Party.
A lot of the gun violence in Chicago is gang-related. Most people who own guns do not go out shooting. There's only, like 15,000 gun deaths a year, from, if I remember, Bowling for Columbine correctly. I don't know.
There's 13,000, but almost triple that for suicides.
Okay. So, 13,000 isn't a lot of deaths, really, relative to the population. If you were to, legalize drugs, the gang violence would plummet, therefore gun violence would also plummet. The Libertarian Party would not endorse amending the Second Amendment, but I libertarians don't like gun violence, and that's one of our ways we think that we can
Okay.
reduce
I think
that.
that was an important clarification.
If I might add one thing on the gun issue, let's consider this. A bullet should cost at least as much as a cigarette. Here in Chicago, I don't know what they go for now, $10 a pack, maybe even more. That's 50 cents a cigarette. If you go to a store and buy 22 caliber bullets, they run for about a nickel, 6, 7 cents. Okay. In any event, that is a tax that we need to consider just because cigarettes are as deadly as guns. If we feel cigarettes are as deadly as guns, then they should be taxed on the same level.
Libertarians would think that the price of ammunition should be dictated by the market.
I think Chris Rock had a good line on that bullets should be $20,000 a piece. That way, if you want to shoot somebody, you really wanted to shoot them.
Precisely. Yes, precisely. Now, Mr. Scott Summers, Illinois, the state that you will be representing, should you be elected as U.S. Senator, it's currently suffering from a budgetary crisis that is affecting all of its citizens. The consequence of this is that with Illinois not having a budget is making voters concerned on how social programs will be funded, whether pensions will remain, schools will be open, and numerous other concerns that, if they're not solved, can cause people to move out of Illinois. Currently, Illinois loses money to the federal government as the federal aid is drawn away from the state an estimated 30 cents on every dollar, making it impossible to have a balanced budget, while other states, like Texas, for example, have balanced their budget using surplus federal aid. If you are to be elected as U.S. Senate, what are your policies to get this state back on track, and would you be willing to call for a federal bailout for Illinois?
Okay, well, as a U.S. Senator, I would have no direct effect, of course, on state policy. I, like my colleague Tim Curtin, comptroller candidate, would be jawboning a whole lot for fiscal responsibility in Springfield. I note what Senator Kirk has said about the funding of pensions in Illinois, and he has as much said to his own state, go stew in your own juice. The federal government is not going to bail you out. Now, he's an Illinois senator, and he's talking trash on his own state? Oh, please. Oh, please. We need to do something collaboratively with the federal government with respect not only to Illinois' pensions, but other states are not quite as well funded. I think New Jersey is one in particular. What I would be suggesting, and perhaps Senator Kirk might buy into this idea, is kind of a hybrid for our pension system for the public employees of Illinois, in effect with the federal government backing up the pensions to the level of Social Security payments. There would have to be loans from the federal government to the state to accomplish that, but in effect the federal government would be backstopping our dire pension situation, our dire financial situation here in Illinois. I don't expect that that is a real easy sell. I wouldn't think it would be an easy sell at all. But at least Senator Kirk needs to be coming up with some constructive suggestions and not saying that we just all need to just make do somehow and, you know, life for the other 49 states is going to go on. It just isn't appropriate.
But there is a federal angle to this that we lose money in the equation with other states, where other states get a positive. A net positive from federal taxes that the state of Illinois doesn't. So that there is a federal component to the fiscal woes here in the state of Illinois.
A lot of those budget disparities, the states that come out, so to speak, on top with more revenue, federal revenue coming in than going out, are states that have high military concentrations in terms of bases, in terms of defense contractors building munitions and ships and airplanes, and a lot of our money goes there. This ties back into my suggestion that we really need to ramp back on our defense expenditures. 800 or so bases around the world. We don't need to be doing that. We can be thoughtfully winnowing down. I don't want to put anything in jeopardy. I mean, there are bad people out there, okay? So I'm not, sitting here waving a white flag. There are bad people. We need to be prepared for that. But on a thoughtful basis, we need to scale back our military. And I'll say this as well. We as a country, if we continue to expand our military and continue to run up debt to pay for it, which is preposterous, we are ignoring the lessons of history, okay? The ancient Romans got overextended on military, they shriveled economically. The ancient Chinese, same thing. Built the China Wall, right? Great Wall of China. They got overextended. Their civilizations constricted and contracted. They didn't all go away, but they ceased to be economic powers. Same with the European, the colonial powers after World War II. They were the British, the rulers of the world for much of the 19th century, right? They had their economies shrivel up. And we face the same thing. And we've seen it in our lifetimes with the disintegration of the Soviet Union. They disintegrated because they got overextended militarily and they could no longer sustain their military. We face the same fate unless we address this forthrightly.
All right. Libertarian would concur with everything you just said there.
Thank you.
So in other words, cooperation is not a bad word then to you.
That's democracy, absolutely.
As long as that
Bipartisan.
cooperation is voluntary, libertarians are not selfish and don't just care about, you know, if libertarians only cared about each other, there'd be no marketplace, there'd be no, you know, shake hands. That's how
Absolutely.
libertarians, that's a symbol of, you know.
That's the way it should be.
Democracy.
Absolutely. Currently, Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton have indicated that they will continue military operations in the Middle East. If elected to the Senate, would you hold your policy of decreasing military funding, and would you be in opposition in the Senate for any continuation of military operations in the Middle East?
I would sure like to wind those down as quickly as possible.
Okay.
I think it would be difficult, probably counterproductive. That's a mild word, counterproductive, to pull out on a summary basis. One thing that we need to be doing today is doing more for the refugees. A lot of them are in camps in Jordan and Lebanon and Turkey. I don't think we as a nation are contributing enough to the needs of those people, and we are not letting in enough people. It was us who went into Iraq. We broke it. We need to fix it. It's carried over now to Syria. We have an obligation to the people who are suffering, who have been displaced, to make their way better. We have to do that with all dispatch, and we need to start tomorrow as far as I'm concerned.
Quick follow-up to that. What is the U.S.'s responsibility or position or role? What should our role be in the Middle East overall?
Well, it's the role I envision worldwide. It's a longer-term goal, I think. But rather than being the policeman of the world, we can be a good neighbor to the world. We can be a leader among nations, nothing the matter with that, but let us be good neighbors to the world. It starts again tomorrow. Maybe that's very incremental progress. I would love for that to happen in the Middle East. It will take years and years. I mean, it's decades to get into this problem. It'll take decades to get out. But I think that's the goal. Let us look forward as a human race.
All right, well said. Now, final question. The war on drugs has led to an increase in construction of prisons and an ever-growing prison population. Currently, marijuana is still deemed as dangerous as heroin by our government and law enforcement agencies. This has resulted in many of our citizens to be arrested and jailed. Would you be a leading voice in the Senate to call for decriminalization of marijuana and other drugs and allow them to be available to the public?
I would. It's the situation now, particularly with marijuana, as much as it was in the 1920s during Prohibition. People were going to drink, irrespective of what the laws were. I mean, we can want the best for one another, but people are going to do what they're going to do. And if you, not for me, of course, I don't, but if people want to smoke marijuana, they're going to do it. So, I mean, in effect, we should end the literal, almost, prohibition on marijuana. You know, tax it out the wazoo, perhaps, but it's foolish to continue on the way we are, at least in terms of marijuana policy. Heroin, cocaine are bad actors, and we have to do a lot there to not only curb their use, but more importantly, help the people who are suffering from addiction. We don't have nearly enough hospital beds for the people in need. Another public health crisis, as far as I'm concerned, just as guns are a crisis. I'll leave it at that.
Can I add?
Go ahead.
I think we have more common ground.
Sure. In addition, I agree with everything you just said there. With ending the prohibition of marijuana, that also extends to other. You're locking a bunch of people up for nonviolent crimes. They get out of prison. They have that stigma of being an ex-con. They can't participate in the workforce. They go back to crime. If that would solve so many issues, I feel. And just to comment, people are going to do drugs regardless. You can make it a crime. You can continue to lock people up. You can ban guns. People are still going to own guns, too. I just thought I had to get that in there. Yes, that's definitely something that Greens and Libertarians can work on.
Our teams will still steal cars. We do have driver's license.
Precisely.
For everything.
No.
If it's all right with Kit, there was one, because we've got a couple minutes here. There was one other question that I wanted to bring you. Race relations in this country are at an all-time low, due in part to to the presidential race here, but also to a proliferation of videos that have really underscored and highlighted that there are two standards in this country, black and white. As senator, how would you address the racial issue in this country, and hopefully try to mend some fences as far as race relations are concerned?
I think we need finally to atone for the sins of our ancestors. With the exception of the Native Americans and the slaves, all of us are descended from immigrants. The European Americans, from whom I am descended, I guess victimize is a very polite word, the native peoples and the slaves. We as a nation need to apologize for that. We need to have a day of atonement, a day of contrition for all the wrongs that were visited on the blacks and on the Native Americans, any other individuals, groups, indeed people from China who came to build our railroads who were treated very poorly. That would be a first step, a substantial first step. Reparations have been discussed. I don't think there's a whole lot we can do with that, given we're 5-6 generations on. But I would think at the very least we should have federal scholarship funds for people of color, for people of minorities, again, buying into education. We need to treat one another as brothers. Our country was founded on diversity, apart from what I discussed about the slaves. That is our strength. That is our resource. We need one another. We depend on one another. Each citizen brings a lot to the table. We do need to do a whole lot better by one another. And once again, it begins with each of us. We could legislate it from Springfield or Washington until the end of time. It won't work until millions and millions of us get it in our hearts that we need to open our arms to our fellow man and woman.
Last quick question, and this is something our friend Mike Callis from Chicago Independent Media here, or Indie Media rather, was headed downtown, probably still will be headed downtown for a protest about the Dakota Access Pipeline. That issue has been completely ignored or virtually ignored in the mainstream media. It's been virtually exclusively an aspect of social media. What is the Green Party's position, or what is your position on the Dakota Access Pipeline, and how the issue there in North Dakota, and it's coming this way, as a matter of fact, how that should be handled?
It is a harbinger of things that should have happened a long time ago. That goes to multiple issues. Once again, goes to the native peoples who preceded the Europeans on this continent. They have an absolute right to their culture and their traditions, and if we are literally bulldozing them, that is a monumental mistake. I know Jill Stein and Ajamu Baraka, our presidential and vice presidential candidates, were out there and were arrested for spray painting on bulldozers. I would like to go myself if it continues that way. This also ties in with climate change. Again, we have to stop burning so much stuff. We don't need oil pipelines anymore. We need to wean ourselves off that. So again, I support all the actions up in North Dakota. I will continue to support actions like that that displace people, that marginalize people, that are bad for our economy, bad for our environment. I will do whatever it takes to get us steered back onto what I think, and I think many of us would think, is the right path for America.
Stonies did that because we ran out of rocks.
Exactly.
Okay.
Actually, we have a question from somebody watching the live feed.
Great.
It's on Twitter. It's from Mr. Paul DuPont. And he asked this question to you specifically. Scott Summers, can we remove oil and gas subsidies and apply subsidies to renewable energies? Will that be enough?
It's something we absolutely must do. We have any number of direct and indirect subsidies of the fossil fuel industry, and it's way past time that those be winnowed back. Again, I think a crash cutoff would not be in our best interest collectively, but the subsidies have to end. The giveaway lease rights to federal land for extraction of minerals, that has to end. I think that is where we need to go. Is just I'm trying to think of the rest of the question. Perhaps you can give it to me again.
Absolutely, absolutely. He asked, can we remove oil and gas subsidies and apply subsidies to renewable energies? Will that be enough? That was the second part of the question.
Absolutely has to be done. Probably will not be quite enough, but then that ties back into the Green New Deal. I mean, it's multiple things we have to be doing. You just don't have one tool in your toolbox. You got a hammer, a screwdriver, a saw, whatever. If all you got is a hammer, you're not going to get very far as a carpenter. So we have to have multiple tools for our multiple problems, multifaceted problems.
All right. Well, other than that, thank you, Mr. Scott
Thank you.
Summers. If you would like, we'd like to give you a chance to make a closing statement to our viewers who are watching this live.
Well, I'll just say a few words. I'm very grateful for this opportunity, and for all of you here in the audience, it's a pleasure to be seeing all of you and being among you, and I'm certainly grateful to Veracity In Defiance. There is a better day. We are not... We should not drown ourselves in sorrow. There is a better day. We are Americans. We are world leaders. We are neighbors among the world. We need to pull together as a world, embrace one another, and do right by one another. And the Green Party, at least that is what this Green Party person thinks, and I hope that hearts around the world think the same thing.
Thank you very much.
We're a little DIY here. We're a little do-it-yourself, and there's a poetic justice to that in as much as the dominant parties have sucked up all of the media in this country. So we've had to do things a little bit on the cheap, and that. But I think that's important that people understand that, because the money has drifted in a very particular direction to the detriment of dialogue in this country.
If I may, from the Libertarian Party, do you have any closing statements that you would like to make?
I just want to say that we got an important election coming up, and please consider voting for the Libertarian Party if you want the government out of your bedroom, out of your wallet, and generally out of your life, and let people, free people to work together. Vote for the Libertarian Party, please.
If I might add something to this, this is something we're both going to agree on very much. I won't get too far into Illinois election law, but in order to become an established party, which is what the Democrats and Republicans are under the state statute, so-called new parties have to get 5% of the vote statewide. We're looking at polls for Libertarians and the Greens, and we're kind of 2-3%. It is imperative, if we're going to make any progress as a political party in this state, to make that 5%. I think some people feel that some of the races are sewn up. I don't think it is really an issue of, lesser of two evils or anything like that. I hope you will encourage your families and friends to consider that 5% threshold, if nothing else, to get the Libertarians and the Greens on the ballot going forward.
Well said.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Yesterday on a local radio program, Governor Rauner's appointee to the comptroller position spoke as if she was the only other candidate, as if the only other candidate was a Democrat. She followed up by continuing the personal attacks against her opponent. When the race is about two people or two parties, the likelihood of the conversation diverting from the substantial to the personal becomes an easy distraction for the corrupted and broken system.
Everyone who is watching, our democracy relies on accountability. That is the truest guarantee of maintaining a functioning, responsive government. That, however, demands action. by our citizens who resolve to faithfully go to the polls to cast their ballot, but are also on the phone to their representatives and in the streets for justice. And we would like to thank you.
Indeed. Thank you so much, everybody.
And all the other Green Party candidates who are here.
You know, we've got a few minutes here. I would like to open up the floor to anybody from the audience or anybody in attendance here who would like to ask any of the candidates. Tim Curtin, Scott Summers, or our Libertarian representative here, if you have any questions for
Perhaps we
them.
could squeeze Tim in back.
We can always squeeze Tim in here.
Why don't you bring a chair there, Tim? This one, that's okay.
The floor is open for anyone who wants to ask any questions to the candidates or even the Libertarian representative. We have somebody in the back.
I'd like to know what the Libertarian position is on climate change, global warming, the incineration of the planet. How are we gonna solve that?
Our presidential nominee, Gary Johnson, believes climate change is real. He believes it's man-made. This is not necessarily a position of the party, but his position is has been floated as a carbon tax. But generally, libertarians believe that if you were to extend, just property rights, so when you pollute, you are trespassing. And we look at the environmental issues through that sort of frame. Hope that answers your question.
Anyone else want to respond to that or expand on it? Okay. All right. You know, I guess my biggest question is what's been the biggest challenge for each of you in not being a Democrat or Republican?
Well, I can lead off with that. I think as children, we are all hardwired for a two-party system. I know I was. I remember distinctly my teachers in 4th, 5th, 6th grade going on and extolling the virtues of two parties and how it had made America great. And I think that is part of the problem. We are all trained literally to think as two parties, yes or no, black or white, night or day. It is not that simple a choice. Other countries like the United Kingdom, like Canada, they have two major parties. They also have a few minor parties sprinkled in as well. And I'd like to suggest that I don't think our republic will be brought to its knees by having a few libertarians and a few Greens sprinkled among our legislators and executive officers. We need, as a country, to focus on that. The media, the mainstream media, is blind to that issue. In effect, that's something it really annoys me. They are, in effect, handicapping the races. They are picking winners and losers. That's not their job at all. As far as I'm concerned, I'm sure you'll agree, sir, anybody who's on the ballot should be on equal footing and equal interview time. But that's just not the case. Libertarians and Greens this election cycle have been just dismissed out of hand. It's a real disservice to the public.
Tim, what was the trigger for you that finally pushed you over the edge and said, damn, I'm going to run for comptroller? And
Well, it was the budget crisis in Springfield, the refusal of both parties to do absolutely anything to solve the budget crisis. Let me comment on the larger issue of where this republic needs to go. The way I look at it, and done a lot of studying of history, because I think if you don't learn from your past mistakes, you're going to continue to repeat them, and I know Scott was talking about some of that. We're at a crossroads in this country. There's no question about it. I look at it back in the 1840s and the 1850s, when the democracy was faced with the question of slavery. And neither party, the major parties at the time, were responding to it. A little group called the Free Soilers came up. Later on, they became the Republicans. There was a four-way race in 1860 for president. Thank God Lincoln won. And he came out of the basis He came out of the Free Soiler movement and saved the Republic. So it's a long haul. We have a lot of work to do. I'm grateful that I'm neither a Democrat or Republican. I got it out of my system a long time ago. And I'm grateful for the fact that I actually use my mind and people don't tell me what to do. So I think the voters are actually beginning to think that way. We're going to win by having democracy break out in our state. I think we can get to 5%. I think we'll do better than that because people are desperate for change. The people I talk to, wherever I go, it's a shame that there is not enough publicity for democracy to break out and everywhere. But I think we're making strides, and I'm not pessimistic. I think we're beginning to get our message out, and I'm optimistic about our future.
It really has to be a work of passion to be Green Party or Libertarian Party because you are fighting an uphill battle, and you're not guaranteed the media attention. You're not guaranteed even being elected. There's almost a guarantee now for Republicans, Democrats to get elected, or at least flip back and forth every couple of years. Mike Ellis.
Sometimes I see that independent parties come out during election time and they want people to get together and vote for them. But I'm curious about what are the parties doing in the off season to support local organizing? Can you give me an example of some local campaign that the party or you yourself have gone out there and supported, not just rhetorically, but as having boots on the ground and actually going down, showing solidarity and marching with the people? Can you name a campaign that you guys are concerned with and that the party has actually been involved with to support?
This is just my personal opinion. I think we Greens here in Illinois have come up a little short on that idea. We definitely need to be working in the so-called off-season. That gets back to my point as well about getting a farm team and raising up a major league team. As incredible as it is, right now there are candidates petitioning. We haven't even had the November election. They're petitioning for school boards, park districts, townships, that type of a thing. That's a great entry level for any one of us who has an interest in politics. It's not for everyone. It's a project. The ballot access laws are very picayune and peculiar, but for these grassroots offices, typically the petition signature requirement is 50 signatures. If you want to run for a library board or something, get your feet wet, terrific. But don't look at it just politically. Look at it as service to your community. It gets back again to my point about helping one another. You can do a whole lot in your community. You may think that, I don't know, my Historic Preservation Commission, maybe I could do something there. Well, yeah, you can. You can preserve a landmark for the future generations. It seems small, but if a whole lot of us are doing small things, it becomes a big thing. You're absolutely right, sir. We do need to do a better ground game in the so-called off-season.
To answer your first part of the question was, what are we planning to do in the off season? And assuming we do get the 5%, I'm going to build up our committee precinct captains and that sort of thing. That's one of the things, and then just more local offices to run. Recruit candidates, even socialize is a good thing. It's one of the best ways to bring people together for your cause is to hang out and have fun.
You guys are talking about getting people to support your party, but what are you doing outside of the party to support the people? Have you ever been in any type of local movement where people are organizing in their community? Has the party gone down and supported those people on the ground and stood in solidarity with any cause? Any cause?
And just to build on what Mike was talking about, I had a local activist, Andy Fair. I don't know if everybody knows. He was on my old radio show, and he was talking about a particular proposition in California, dealing with the Hispanic community there, and people from other communities didn't show up. And when it came time for them to need support, they couldn't rely on the Hispanic community, which was sizable in California, and it cost them dearly. And so, tell me if I'm characterizing what you said accurately, Mike. Is that there's community building by being down in the trenches, and it's sort of critical to be down in the fight with people at the street level.
Agreed entirely.
Tim, please.
Yeah, I would love an opportunity to address that. I've been to, I lived in Hillside, which is Proviso Township, very poor school district. We get something like 18% reimbursement. I've spoken at numerous school board meetings about the financial transactions tax. I'm working with a group called Proviso Together. They hope, as a group of progressives, to elect a progressive school board, which currently is dominated by the Democratic state representative who ran the school board into the ground and ran up huge deficits. So I've been working with them on that. Hope to support their candidacy in April. Might go out in December and help collect them signatures. A couple of years back, the immigrant community decided that 2 million deportations were too many. They put out a call. I put on my sweatshirt and got arrested sitting in front of the ICE building because it was the right thing to do. 8 years ago, our union, which I was an organizer in, we took over Republic Windows and Doors. For 6 days, we held the building. The boss went to jail, and we got tens of thousands of dollars for people. So it's Green Party. It's been a part of my life. Social activism is something I'll always do. I started against the war in Vietnam, and it's in my blood. So,
Personally, I think it's a missed opportunity. I know, having been an activist my whole life, that a lot of activists don't perceive the quote-unquote political class as being a part of their struggle. They almost feel independent of that. And I think if there are political parties that engage activists more aggressively, then I think that'll resonate with a lot of people. We've got time for one more question here, and then actually, well, let's go to this young lady.
I would like to hear what the libertarian views of the pension crisis in Illinois. Do you be able to address that? Do you have a specific solution for funding the pensions and also for government services?
Just to make sure everybody heard that, the question was about the libertarian position on the pension crisis in Illinois and a solution to it.
Well, obviously that it's getting out of control with how much we have to pay these pensions, and it's becoming a liability. I am not exactly sure what the Libertarian Party of Illinois' official position on this matter is. We can't afford it, and we have to make serious cuts. We have to, relative to the surrounding states, Illinois pays their employees significantly more, and it's driving people out of the state, which is less revenue for the state. So we have to kind of, and this is my phrase, separation of union and state, in my opinion.
Okay. The only pushback that I have is that are the pensions something that we really can't afford, or has the financial malfeasance in this state driven us to a point where they've gotten beyond our grasp? And wouldn't something like a financial transaction tax be a solution to that?
Financial transaction tax, how he described it, made a lot of sense, but that's just going to dissuade investing in Illinois.
However,
people down on LaSalle Street are going to if they know that their transactions are going to be taxed, they'll probably be less likely to invest.
Although, I was going to say, although we've seen elsewhere around the world and in Great Britain where they have a very aggressive, far more than has been proposed here, they have a very aggressive financial transaction tax, and there's been no decrease in financial activity. So I just wanted to make that clear.
We have one last question in the background.
I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are on the transportation lockbox amendment that's on the ballot this election from a perspective.
I'm 600% against it. We already don't have enough money in general revenue.
Can you explain a little bit?
Yeah, I
what's
mean,
the background?
what it will do is it will protect the road construction industry. That's it. It's interesting, CTA wouldn't get a dime. CTA is actually excluded from that lockbox. It's incredible. What they're trying to run on the people of Illinois is a con job, with all the advertising. It will do absolutely no good unless you're a construction company. What we need is public transportation. It's ironic to me, one of the first things I got involved in, I lived in Oak Park for quite a long time, and there was a group of us that wanted to expand the Blue Line. It's nuts that it ends in Franklin Park. All the jobs are out in DuPage. So we had a movement to stop the expansion of the Eisenhower, because every time we build a road, traffic seems to find its way. We spent hundreds of millions of dollars moving the crunch on the Eisenhower from Mannheim to 25th. So that's a terrible idea. That's a terrible idea. It'll hurt the people. The people who need the money are not the construction companies. So I urge people to vote no. I voted early and I voted no.
I think that is going to wrap it up for us. Did you have any other?
Actually, final thoughts.
Okay.
And this is in regard to anyone watching who's still undecided. Corporate media and establishment political system like to spread the myth that if you vote for an independent party, no matter it's green or libertarian, socialist, whatever parties will emerge in the future, that you're just wasting your vote. And most notably, the Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton campaign for presidency of the United States. The story that's always shared by corporate media and those on social media as well, that if you vote for Gary Johnson or if you vote for Dr. Jill Stein, that your vote is just going to help Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton. What do you want to tell undecided voters or people who are on the fence about the two candidates, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump? What do you want to tell the people who are watching about why it's important to vote for a third party and why that myth of voting third party is just a waste?
Anybody who speaks against a party other than the Democrats or Republicans is in effect saying, go away. We do have our First Amendment right to assemble and to speak, and that is a political activity. Political activity is the highest held aspect of the First Amendment. New parties invigorate our democracy. We are strangling our democracy with two parties. We will do well to consider new parties as part of our American political framework. And we just need to take a little bit more time as citizens to dig in and find out about people like me and Tim. We owe it to ourselves, we owe it to our families and our friends. There are better ways, there are choices, and you just don't have to have Tweedledee and Tweedledum.
We're a little bit short on time, but I want to give you guys a chance to respond to that too. We'll wrap it up.
You're never wasting your vote if you're voting for someone that you believe in and someone you're excited for. And do vote your conscience. Even in a state like Illinois, Democrats are set to win. So that's one way you can look at it. That's a good, the electoral college isn't at play. You're also building raw vote counts for your upcoming election. You're working towards ballot access, and you're also spreading your messages of your candidate and bringing those messages to the forefront that maybe some of these bigger parties can start to adopt those messages.
I've heard the argument 1,000 times. Well, I'm going to pick the lesser of the two evils. If you pick the lesser of the two evils, aren't you still going to get an evil? It's time to vote for something that's good, and it's time to vote your conscience and vote for a positive vote. So I urge you to vote green in 2016 and put in a blow for democracy. Lord knows our state desperately needs it. Thank you.
Good way to end. Hey, I want to thank each of our candidates and our libertarian representative for, excuse me, for joining this and making this possible.
Thank you.
This was great. I also want to thank Jeffrey Cubbage from the Illinois Green Party volunteer director for supplying the space and for all the hospitality. And a fine beverage before the event here. I also want to thank our producer Dan Lupker, assistant producer Maurice Randall, and our technical advisor Richard Diesel. You guys rocked. I also want to thank everybody here that came out tonight and everybody at home. You guys made this possible. We're going to rerun this.
And lastly, I'd like to add some final words, too.
Yes,
a shout-out to our editor, LV, who just is sitting in the back right next to our assistant producer, Maurice. Thank you for all the hard work that you've done. And also, shout-out to Myra. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you for everything you've done. Those are the other two members of Veracity In Defiance. And that's all from the Green Party campaign office here in Chicago. I'm Kit Cabello, co-founder of Veracity In Defiance. Peace and stay awoke, and good night.
Thank you.
No problem. No problem.
It's not as bad as
Good conversation.
Jim, thank you for being interviewed by us. My pleasure. My pleasure.
When you see Claire,
Hold on, let me just. I think the mic's.